In a moment's time, I'm going to reveal to you just who this preacher is. But before I do that, I need to let you know some kind of bad news. For some crazy reason, right at the end of the interview, Skype decided to chop the preacher's head in half. And I tried to fix it, but there's no way around it. You'll see what I mean, but I'm sure it's not going to ruin the interview for you one bit. You're going to really enjoy this. So sit back, relax, because we're about to take you out of your comfort zone.
Brill. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, Ray. When I got the message from Jen, I was nearly as excited as when my wife said yes. So this is really.
Oh, that's terrific.
Okay, Ray. So question number one: are you a good person?
Yes, I'm morally perfect.
Yeah.
So do you think that churches who don't actively do open-air evangelism, do you think that they possibly might miss out a little bit?
Well, if they want to reach the lost, open-air evangelism is just like one-to-one evangelism, but there's 100 people. And if you're in a lifeboat and you're trying to save people and you figured out a way to pull in 10 at a time rather than one with just one hand, you could get an oar and pull in 10 at once. Take advantage of it. Paul said, if by all means I might save some. And so open air preaching is a wonderful way to reach the lost. When I open air preach, I don't stand on a street corner and holler at passers-by with one of those loud horns. What we do is we gather a crowd who willingly stand and listen to the gospel. And the way we do it is through giving away money, which is kind of strange, but it's like water running uphill. It's very unusual, unnatural, and so people come to see what's going on. So, yeah, churches would grow if they'd grab hold of the Great Commission and actually see what it says. It says, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. D.L. Moody said, I'd rather set 1,000 to work than do the work of 1,000. And you can set 1,000 to work by training them up on how to conquer their fears and how to open air preach in a way that's not obnoxious. And that's the way I believe we can reach the world, the same way the apostles did in the book of Acts. And
D.L. Moody also said, let's love them into the kingdom. So exactly what you say, we need to be winsome when we do that. So that was one of my other questions. I don't want to flatter you in any way, but really you've been a big inspiration in my life as a street preacher. When me and my wife first got married, we didn't have a computer and we didn't have the internet. So I'd work in a school as a classroom assistant helping a young lad with autism. And then in my lunch break, I would go out to the school computers and I'd literally just watch video after video of you doing your open air stuff. I found live streams and all these different kinds of things. But see, you're well known for doing the giving away money sort of thing to draw a crowd. But you also had some other sorts of ways of getting a crowd. Would you like to share some of them over the years?
Oh, look, I've tried every means. And the Apostle Paul said, by all means, save some. He probably didn't think that people would do what I did, but I used every means. I'd give away teddy bears at Christmas, little stuffed bears to people who answered trivia. And a friend of mine called from a place called Costco that sell wholesale stuff. And he said, there's a 6-foot teddy bear here. Do you want it? I says, buy it, bring it back. It was so big I couldn't fit it into my car. But we dragged it along to Huntington Beach and it didn't get a crowd. And I've used so many things to try and get a crowd. I've had guys dress up as pallbearers with a corpse. We'd put a corpse on the ground, not a real corpse, a living person, with a sheet over them. Or sometimes we'd get a dummy and lie it down. And because there's nothing that attracts people like a terrible accident. If there's an accident, people go, what's going on over there? Don't look, it's horrible. Where? We're attracted, and nothing attracts like a funeral. So if you've got a corpse lying on the ground with a sheet over it, with 6 pallbearers wearing sunglasses and that, people come around. And it's very easy to preach the gospel when you start with death. Say, do you think there's an afterlife? So, yeah, I've used the funeral many times and many different ways to reach the crowd. The giving away money is just an answer to trivia. Ask a crowd, how many of you know the capital of France rhymes with Aris and begins with P? That's a clue. And people say, Paris? See, that's it. You must be a university student. Here. What's your name? Fred. Fred, that's right. Here's $1. And it's fun. It makes people laugh. And then you say, hey, sir, you're good at answering questions. Do you think you're a good person? He says, yeah, really good. You want to go for $5? If you're a good person, I'll give you $5. If not, I'll give you $5 anyway for being a good sport. Jump up on the box. Up he gets. Crowd listens. he's thrilled to be there. It's created goodwill, giving away money, and they hear the gospel and without compromise. So,
but I suppose out of all the people that you've interviewed and all the people that have stepped up on the box, are there any that really sort of you've never been able to forget about and that have really sort of glued into your mind?
well, I forget about everybody. Sometimes I see someone I'm interviewing, I've never seen that person before in my life. It's probably because I do 2 or 3 a day, and it gets a blur after a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, when anyone's got a humble heart, it just endears me to them. And, you know, when I say to someone, what do you think happens after someone dies? And they say, oh, I don't know. I say, do you think about it? And they say, yeah, all the time. Are you afraid of dying? Yes. And immediately I'm endeared to that person because of their honesty. And they're the ones that I remember, the ones that drink in the gospel like a man in a desert who's been given water. That's really thrilling.
Yeah, that's great. And I love the faces that you have on all of your thumbnails, because we're interested by faces and you want to know more about it. And yeah, they're very... Yeah.
Oh, hey, a pretty girl does wonders, I tell you.
Yeah, there's only one pretty girl. It's my wife. She's behind the camera.
Yes, I agree with you. And my wife, hey, sweetheart.
I'm only joking. I'm being all of my schmucky Englishness now.
So let's go back to open air preaching anyway before we both get in trouble.
What's your wife's name?
She's called Emma.
Emma. Hi, Emma. You're doing a good job. Steady camera there.
Hi, Ray. Thanks.
You hear that? Yeah.
Oh, she sounds pretty.
Yeah, she's camera shy. Yeah. Anyway, so let's talk about. So we've got George Whitefield, we've got Charles Spurgeon, we've got John Wesley. These guys, they preach to tens of thousands of people in the open air. In fact, George Whitefield, I believe, it's in one of his biographies, it says he spoke to 80,000 people one day. I mean, these are massive numbers. And we read that and we think, wow, open air preaching back then was really blessed. But people might perhaps see the open air preacher we were talking about before with a megaphone, and he's not really engaging anyone. There's no winsomeness about him. And they say, does it still work today? What would your sort of response be to that, Ray?
Oh, yes. The average good open air preacher can reach, in a good open air situation, can reach more than the average church does in 12 months. You know, sometimes I've been open air preaching, I get a good angry heckler, and people pack around. I preached open air in UCLA University a number of years ago to about 200 young people that stayed for 2 hours willfully. There was no, rope around them. And times like that are just absolute highlights in my life to reach so many people. We're not proselytizing in that sense. We just want to tell people how they can find everlasting life. So there's no task more noble than an open air preaching, reaching so many people.
And I think if there are pastors and people watching this, I think open air preaching is the best tool ever to improve your preaching, because someone isn't going to stick around if you're dull. You've got to win them, haven't you? And you've got to keep them engaged.
That's why you've got to be a little bit on the edge with open air preaching. If you listen to me do 1-to-1, I say, hello, how are you? And just sweet and nice. Open air preaching, there's something different. There's a different dynamic. And if you don't do that, one of the great open air preachers, then maybe Tozer said, you're liable to be hit by an apple if you try and be nice in the open air. Don't do it, he says. Just get on the edge. And Jesus was on the edge. Every time he spoke, there was a division in the crowd. People yelled things at him. They wanted to kill him the first sermon he preached. And a lot of the wonderful truths we have in Scripture is because someone in the open air called out something to him and he answered them. But we miss the passion when you read Scriptures that must have been taking place when Jesus preached in the open air.
And Tozer himself was saved by an open air preacher, a German man who couldn't speak English well. So you never know, someone watching this now, you could be the next Tozer listening. It's wonderful. Yeah.
Could I just say something about pastors? If I can get pastors together, this is what I'd say to them. I said, I was in a prayer meeting many years ago, an inter-church prayer meeting, and I could guess what person went to what church by how they prayed. If someone said, Father, I knew they went to John Steele's church because that's how John Steele prayed, Father. And so we imitate our pastors because we hear them so much. And if a pastor just preaches on prophecy and sanctification and glorification and all the other occasions and doesn't preach evangelism, he'll reproduce of his own kind without a concern for the lost. And so if you want your people to be on fire for God and see your church grow, join a racquetball club, join a tennis club, join something where you rub shoulders with the ungodly and witness to people regularly and testify as a pastor what happened from your pulpit and say, I was playing golf last week and I met this atheist and he said such and such. I said to him and I shared the cross with him. He said, hey, thanks for sharing. They're going to say, what? Pastor condescends to the lowly task of evangelism? And you'll eventually reproduce of your own kind. Your sheep will begin to have lambs because you're a shepherd. Strange metaphor. You're a shepherd and you're an example to the flock in what you do. And so pastors, do that. Get a zeal for the lost that consumes you, and you'll reproduce of your own kind in your own flock.
And I could really get us in trouble now quoting Spurgeon, but he said, how can a pastor or a preacher say he's called to preach indoors, but then refuse to go outdoors? And we see it. I mean, we look at Leonard Ravenhill, Paul Washer, many of the best preachers we get indoors started out on the streets and still kept going out on the streets. I met Steve Lawson 2 years ago and got to chat to him a little bit. And again, he said he started out open air preaching. But I've got tremendous respect for you, Ray, because you've kept doing it all the way through, which is wonderful, really.
Well, I can't stop because I care about the lost. Whenever I go somewhere to open air preach, I know I'm going somewhere I don't want to go to say something I don't want to say to people who don't want to hear it. But I can't sit and watch an old black and white movie on Sunday afternoons while people are going to hell. How could I do that? And so the love of Christ constrains me and helps me overcome my fears. So yeah, I count it a privilege. I mean, I've spoken in the most glorious churches with the padded pews and great sound systems and great honorariums and nice people and out to dinner afterwards. But give me an open air day, any day. Far rather open air preach to unsaved people and go home and have mashed potatoes. Just down to earth and wonderful. And I'm going to stay with it. And I hope I die open air preaching.
Yeah, so Ray, tell me then, suppose there is a young man who's watching this and he's thinking, Ray Comfort's really inspired me a lot. I would love to be an open air preacher, but I'm kind of nervous. How do I get started? What advice would you give to that person?
Well, I'm nervous every time. Every Zacchaeus becomes a Goliath whenever I go to witness one-to-one or open air preach. But I think Satan's the father of lies, and his greatest lie is to tell you can't do it, to paralyze you with fear. What you've got to do is do what David did. He ran at Goliath. He didn't stand there and go, whoa. He ran at him. And you've got to do the same thing with your fears. Run at it. Don't wait. Don't think too deeply. Overcome your fears. And the way to do it is this. And the analogy I use is, could I ever get you to jump into a pond that's filled with big chunks of ice, so cold that you die within 3 minutes? You say, no. What say your 4-year-old boy fell into that pond, he's only 3 feet tall, and it's 4 feet deep, and he's drowning. What would you do? You should jump in and save him. You would forget about the coldness. You'd forget about your flesh. You'd just jump in and save him, because love does that. And the Bible says perfect love casts out all fear. Granted, the waters of personal evangelism, especially open-air preaching, are icy cold. But the way to overcome them is let love do its thing in your life. So if you've got a problem with fear, don't pray for less fear. Pray for more love, because that's the problem. It's love that motivates me. It's always love that helps me to conquer my fears. Love for God and love for other people. And so love is incredibly powerful. It'll get a firefighter running in to save some person in a burning building. Why? Because he cares about them. That's why he's a firefighter. And so he ignores his fears because he's not thinking about himself, but the other person. And that's the key to reaching the lost.
But so just going back to the young person again, though, suppose they don't have any friends who do open air preaching. The church doesn't do it. How did they get started? Like, what would be a...
I'm going to tell you a little secret. Okay. I'd rather go open air preaching by myself. Far rather go open air preaching by myself than with someone else. You want to know why? Because if I make an idiot of myself, nobody knows me. I can just walk off. But if I fluff it and dry up or whatever with friends that I've brought with me, it makes me feel like a fool. So when I go open air preaching, I did it for 12 years, almost every day by myself, so I'm kind of used to it. But I wouldn't worry if you have to go by yourself, and all you do is get a little soapbox and stand on it, and then just begin asking the trivia. And the second time you do it, it'll be harder than the first.
So Ray, just tell me then, the rumour has it that you are never caught anywhere in public without having a few tracts on you, and you said if anyone ever catches you out in public, you'll give them $1,000. Is that true?
Absolutely. I've said it again and again and again, and it can never happen. No one will ever find me in public without a gospel tract, because I've got John 3:16 and a sinner's prayer tattooed on my chest. No, I'm just kidding. I really do. I really do always carry tracts with me. And that's because I can give them to strangers. And I've learned something very important about myself, and that is I'm a coward, and I will make provision for the flesh. Let's say I go to what's called a Home Depot store, where they sell in California and throughout the US men's stuff like hammers and stuff like that. I'll walk through that place with tracts in my pocket, and this is what I'll say to myself. Oh, that guy looked at me. Oh, he's gone. Never mind. Got out of it. So I had to realize that's what I'm like. So I actually take the tracts and have them in my hand when I go into that store. So when that guy looks at me and gives me a nod, I say, oh, excuse me, sir, did you get $1 million bill? And he takes it, and I think, good. No excuses. No provision for the flesh.
What, have you got any tracks on you now? Do I dare test you?
Yes. It has to be in public, but hang on.
I was going to say, we're not in public technically.
Yeah, it has to be in public, but
yeah, but you're like a cowboy.
This one here is $1 million bill,
well
and it's actually glued to the inside of my phone.
No, that's cool. I didn't know if you'd have it on you, but I just remember hearing you tell a story about one day someone came to you and you were in the swimming baths, and someone approached you and said, give me $1,000, and you went, and then pulled them out of your swim shorts, which
yeah. There's a second part to that, Joe. And that is that if I have $1 million on me or a gospel tract, the person who asked the question owes me $1,000. I forgot to tell that part.
Right, okay. Well, typical evangelist, always trying to get money. So we were talking about before about how sort of, if you like, the Lord's blessed Living Waters, 100 million views. Yeah, that's right, 100 million, or is it 100 billion views? 100 million views on the channel.
No, you're prophesying. I take that. 100 billion.
Yeah, I was just thinking. Yeah, not very good at maths. Yeah, I'll just stick to the evangelism. Yeah, but yeah, so you've got this vast ministry. Many people, I expect, are asking for your time. You're getting preaching engagements, all these different things. But at the same time, you're a family man. You've got a wife. You've got children, grandchildren. How do you get that balance? And you've got Sam. Yes, you've got the gorgeous dog. But how do you get that balance right? You know, because I've just got a newborn son, and I just find myself seeing the needs vast. The Titanic is going down. There's people who are lost, and I want to give as much as I can to ministry, but at the same time, I don't want to neglect my family responsibilities.
Right. Well, the key with me was to marry my kids off real quick. So they got married off to godly people, and they're doing fine.
Yeah,
I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. And so it's very important that you do not neglect your responsibilities to your wife and your child. You know, you can be a successful preacher, but you've failed if you fail to take care of your family. So there has to be that balance, and God will give you wisdom. You know, you say, honey, I've spent the day with you. Would you mind if I go out for an hour and just give out tracts at a local, mall or something like that? I want to go out and preach. And if she's a godly wife, she'll say, oh, thanks for the time you spent helping out, and I'll be praying for you while you're out there. And I'm sure that your wife will do that because she's gorgeous and she's a great camera woman.
You know, I'm glad you're on the other side of the camera right now, Ray. You're too charming for your own good.
I suppose one final thing. If I ever did, I'd love to do this, but if I ever flew over to California, to Huntington Beach, would I be able to preach alongside you in the open air? Would you? I
would be absolutely honored. I got to tell you something. I checked out your YouTube channel before I did this, and I was very impressed with your thumbnails, with the titles, with the views you're getting, and I think it's wonderful, and you've got a great personality, and I think I'd be honored I'd sit at your feet and listen to you preach. And
Oh, no.
to meet
I
your
think
beautiful wife. So come over and have a meal with us at the ministry. We'll give you a tour, and then we'll go open air preaching together.
I would love that. Really, there's a man called Vinnie Commons who trained me, who's an open air preacher who started young, and then really, it's second to you, Ray. I really wouldn't be here if it wasn't the Lord's really used you in my life, and I'm sure many lives. So we might have to get that sorted out at some point. I'd really love to do that. And if you're watching this now, leave it in the comment box if you'd like to see that Ray Comfort and Joe Kirby preaching. That'd be awesome. Yeah. If you'd like to see the full 45-minute interview I had with Ray Comfort, click this link now. And if you'd like to see what Ray's face looks like, not just half, but the full thing, then do check out his YouTube channel here.